My brother stood up, clinked his glass, and looked directly at me in front of 25 of our closest relatives. "Let's be honest," he sneered, his voice echoing across the upscale dining room. "You don't belong at this table. You're a financial drain, you dress like a charity case, and quite frankly, you're an embarrassment to this family's name. You're not one of us." Nobody defended me, not my parents, not my aunts, no one. Instead, they just stared at their plates, suffocating me in their silent agreement. I quietly picked up my purse and prepared to leave. But 15 minutes later, before the bill could even be settled, every single credit card my brother threw down declined. The atmosphere shifted to pure panic until the head waiter bypassed him entirely, walked straight to me, and bowed deeply. "Welcome back, owner. How should we handle these individuals?" You should have seen my brother's face. It completely froze. "My name is Skylar. I am 32 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the designated ghost at my own family's feast. You see, the name on my birth certificate carries a lot of weight in this city. My family runs a massive, high-society real estate empire built entirely on superficial status and flashy designer logos. But early on, I made a choice that my relatives viewed as an unpardonable sin. I chose a modest, intensely private lifestyle. To them, my lack of an aggressive corporate title and my refusal to flaunt wealth meant I was the ultimate disappointment. The black sheep, who simply couldn't compete with my older brother Jordan. Jordan was everything I wasn't, or at least, everything our status-obsessed family worshipped. Arrogant, loud, and deeply superficial, he wore his position in the family company like a weapon, using it to diminish anyone he deemed beneath him. I usually managed to keep my distance from his toxic theater, but then the invitation arrived. It wasn't a request. It was a royal summons. Jordan was hosting a massive engagement dinner to celebrate his upcoming marriage to an equally snobbish heiress. The venue was the Grand Pavilion, the most exclusive, hyper-expensive restaurant in the city, an opulent glass-fronted establishment built for the ultra-wealthy. I knew walking through those doors meant walking into a trap, but I had no idea just how far my own flesh and blood would go to destroy me. I stepped out of the taxi and smoothed down my outfit, a simple, elegant tailored blazer and tailored trousers. I didn't wear flashing luxury logos, which in my family's eyes was practically a crime. Walking into the private dining room of the Grand Pavilion, the contrast was immediate and suffocating. The room was a blinding sea of heavy gold jewelry, freshly sprayed expensive colognes, and over-the-top designer dresses. Sitting around the massive mahogany table were 25 of my closest relatives, all preening in their high society wealth. The very moment I pulled out a chair, the temperature in the room plummeted. The passive-aggressive whispers started instantly. My Aunt Sylvia leaned over to my cousin, loud enough for half the table to hear, making a biting remark about my frugal aesthetic and questioning if my business was failing. I chose to ignore them, keeping my head high, but Jordan and his fiancée, Vanessa, were just getting started. To them, my presence wasn't about family. I was a carefully chosen prop meant to make them look superior. Jordan smirked from the head of the table, loudly ordering the most absurdly expensive caviar and vintage champagne on the menu, making sure to ask the waiter if the price was too intimidating for certain guests at the table. He laughed, looking directly at me, while Vanessa snickered into her silk napkin. They wanted me isolated, small, and deeply uncomfortable, laying the groundwork for a public execution of my dignity. The clinking of a silver spoon against a crystal wine glass silenced the entire room. Jordan stood up at the head of the table, his chest puffed out with arrogant pride as he prepared to deliver his big speech. At first, he began with the usual boastful remarks about his corporate achievements and how Vanessa's family empire perfectly aligned with our own. But then, his eyes locked onto mine, and his smile twisted into something deeply malicious. He shifted his toast entirely, turning it into a vicious, calculated personal attack designed to thoroughly humiliate me in front of his wealthy future in-laws. "As we celebrate true success tonight," Jordan said, his voice echoing loudly across the private hall, "let's be honest about everyone at this table. You don't belong here, Skylar. You're nothing but a financial drain on our legacy. You dress like an absolute charity case, and quite frankly, you are a constant embarrassment to this family's name." He sneered openly, leaning forward. "Let's be completely blunt about it right now in front of everyone. You are simply not family. You're just riding our parents' coattails while contributing absolutely nothing of value to society." A cold shock paralyzed me. I looked around the long mahogany table, desperately searching for a single ally among the 25 relatives staring back. But no one defended me. My parents actively looked away, staring down at their plates, while my aunts and cousins softly smirked in silent agreement. The absolute suffocating silence of the room cemented their total betrayal. My hands shook slightly, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of tears. I quietly reached for my purse, entirely done with their toxic theater, and prepared to walk out. I gripped the strap of my purse, ready to push back my chair and leave this miserable gathering behind forever. But before I could stand up and make my exit, the heavy double doors of the private dining room swung open. The lavish dinner had finally concluded, and the primary waiter approached the head of the table, presenting a silver tray that held an astronomical bill. Jordan didn't even blink at the staggering total. Eager to put on one final show of absolute financial dominance for his future in-laws, he proudly whipped out his premium black credit card and tossed it onto the tray with a theatrical flick of his wrist. The waiter took the card and slipped out of the room. A few minutes passed, and the heavy silence of the room was replaced by Jordan loudly bragging about his upcoming vacation. But then, the waiter returned, his face unusually tense and pale. He leaned down, quietly informing Jordan that the premium card had been declined. Jordan's arrogant smile instantly vanished, replaced by a deep crimson flush of pure rage. "Run it again! Your machines are obviously broken!" he barked, aggressively throwing down 3 more cards from his wallet: his corporate business card, his personal checking card, and even Vanessa's platinum card. One by one, the waiter swiped them. One by one, every single card failed. A message flashed on the terminal: "Account frozen by corporate order." The atmosphere in the room shifted from smug superiority to absolute, unadulterated panic. The 25 relatives began frantically whispering to each other as the head waiter firmly stated that nobody would be permitted to leave the premises until the massive bill was settled in full. The private dining room felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Jordan was practically screaming at this point, his face a deep, embarrassed purple as he slammed his fist onto the mahogany table. "Do you have any idea who I am?" he roared at the waiter, desperately trying to salvage his shattered pride in front of Vanessa and his future in-laws. "Your payment terminal is a piece of garbage. Demand to see your manager right now before I have this entire establishment shut down." The 25 relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their previous smugness completely replaced by the terrifying realization that they might actually be trapped here. A moment later, the heavy oak doors swung open, and the head waiter walked back into the room, accompanied by the executive restaurant manager. Jordan puffed out his chest, ready to unleash a wave of corporate threats, but the manager didn't even look at him. Instead, both men completely bypassed Jordan, ignored the wealthy relatives, and walked straight down the long table toward me. The entire room went dead silent as the manager stopped right beside my chair, pressed his hands together, and gave me a deep, incredibly respectful bow. "Welcome back, owner," the manager said, his voice echoing clearly across the paralyzed room. We were notified of your arrival, but you requested privacy. How should we handle these individuals regarding the outstanding balance? I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water, letting the weight of his words sink into the stunned silence. This was the exact moment the truth exploded in their faces. I wasn't broke, and I wasn't a financial drain. Months ago, tired of my family's constant superficial judgment, I had quietly used my independent venture capital firm to buy out the entire luxury hospitality group that owned the Grand Pavilion. I had kept it a complete secret to protect myself from their toxic greed, but tonight, the secret was officially out. The shock that washed over my brother's face was absolute poetry. The smug, arrogant grin he had worn all evening instantly shattered, his facial features completely freezing in absolute horror. The 25 relatives sitting around the long table looked as if they had just seen a ghost. Jordan's mouth opened and closed repeatedly, but no sound came out. His mind was entirely paralyzed by the massive power dynamic flip. I leaned back in my chair, looking directly into his panicked, wide eyes. "You see, Jordan," I said, my voice cutting through the suffocating silence. "You were so busy projecting false wealth that you didn't realize your cards didn't fail because of a broken machine. They failed because of me." I explained to the stunned room exactly why his financial world had just collapsed. Just an hour before dinner, my independent corporate lawyers had uncovered irrefutable evidence that Jordan had been systematically embezzling millions from the core family trust to fund his flashy, debt-ridden lifestyle. As the true owner and majority stakeholder of the private equity firm managing those assets, I ordered an immediate total freeze on every single one of his accounts. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. The very parents and aunts who had ignored me or smirked at my public humiliation minutes ago began to stammer out pathetic apologies, trying desperately to defend their actions. But looking at Jordan's frozen, broken expression, I knew it was entirely too late for excuses. I stood up, entirely done with their toxic theater. Turning to the manager, I gave my final instructions. "Please let these 25 relatives pay their own individual shares of the bill. For anyone who cannot or refuses to pay, feel free to involve our legal team and local security immediately." I picked up my purse and walked out of the private dining room, leaving them scrambling in sheer panic. In the weeks that followed, Jordan's engagement completely fell apart, and his reputation in high society was ruined. My family was forced to respect my boundaries from a distance, realizing I held all the power. What would you have done if your own brother humiliated you like this in front of everyone? Would you have bailed them out, or walked away to let them face the music? Comment your thoughts down below, and thank you for watching.